Hey YouTube, Dawson Ryder here. Welcome to my review for the second and the last issue of the two-part Power Rangers Unlimited series. So the first one, we focused in on some origins of Astronema and Ecliptor, and this time we actually do some stuff with young Rita and Master Vile, and the Phantom Rangers there too. So I thought this was very solid. I really quite enjoyed it, and I think one of the things I like the most, which I'll probably bring up multiple times, is that what I think was neat about this one especially I thought about, is that it does a really good job of being this kind of almost standalone origin story. Like, it gives you some really interesting lore and character background, but it's also tying into stuff that we're going to be delving into in the main storyline of the comics right now for both the Mighty Morphin and the Power Rangers series. Because we bookend it with the Phantom Ranger at this Imperial site where the Imperials just blew up this planet or destroyed this planet. Not the whole planet, but like they leveled everything on the planet because they really want it to be reborn. But that happened in Power Rangers issue 8, and Phantom Ranger's investigating it for Zordon at the beginning, and then we bookend at the end of the comic with him there as well. And we flash back then to young Rita being protected by her mom, who is being hunted by this group of Tangas, and one of them looks like he's from Night at the Museum Tanga boss guy. And they're trying to get Rita there for some sort of ritual, but the Phantom Ranger saves them with invisibility abilities. That's fun to say, invisibility abilities. But he saves them with those abilities, just like in the show, and he gets hurt in the process, but Rita's mom doesn't want him to die. Like, he's like, no, don't save me, but they keep trying to save him. And somebody save... I'm so sorry. Anyway, so they take him to his ship, and they're like, oh man, you're made of like morphin energy, and this suit is like run off of grid energy, and they kind of explain that it's kind of like a life support suit, sort of, or like something like that. But bottom line is, his energy is very much tied to grid energy, and they need to get him to some of that. So they take him to this like forge base. It's called like the Master Forge or something like that, and they explain that it was a base once used by the race, which was the Morphin Masters, when they were studying the grid, presumably, you know, before they knew enough to merge with it and whatnot. So another mention of them. Watch out, Dawson's gonna do another Morphin Masters video. I don't know. I couldn't think of a theory based on this one, but we'll have to see. But regardless, that was a cool mention, and I'll maybe bring up something about that later. But they take him there basically to infuse him with grid energy and to save his life. But they're still being hunted at the same time. But before they get hunted, we do have time for some backstory. So we get a little bit of insight into Master Vile. So they talk about how, because the forge reminds Rita's mom of like studies that her and her husband Eldon used to do of the grid before he done went nuts. And they're talking about how they saw into the possible futures of their daughter, and it shows like this really cool image of like, you know, future evil Rita as well as future Mystic Mother Rita. And it's really funny because the whole, like, may the power protect you, and the Morphin grid, and they talk about how this area is grid sensitive. It's always felt like a poor man's version of the Force, and this really feels like the same thing, because they're like, oh, this area is grid sensitive, because that's what that base is. It's not just a base for studying, it was made because it was a grid sensitive area, and so that made me think of that, and especially too with like interpreting visions of the future, which is very much another Force thing. So it was very Star Wars-y there. But it was really cool, because it talked about how they saw Rita's potential futures, but then when doing this is when Eldon became corrupted, and he got in touch with Dark Spectre, and he's like, yo, you got a job? I don't know where that joke was going. That wasn't even a joke. I don't know. Anyway, stop, Dawson. Anyway, he got in touch with him. There was a joke about like being in touch with somebody with, I don't know. Anyway, stop. In touch with Dark Spectre, and we literally see how he's corrupted, because it's like, oh, I have glasses, but now they're evil glasses. So I was a little bit confused at the start, because there's several sections where like Rita and her mom and Phantom Ranger are telling each other stories, and like one of the stories, Rita's telling the Phantom Ranger is like, oh yeah, the Master Vile destroyed her dad. I'm like, oh wait, are they rewriting it so that like Rita was adopted and she was stolen? Because I remember they did backstory in Go-Go about how, you know, she was tricked by her husband or Master Vile hiding his true nature or whatever from her, and she was trying to save Rita from him and asked Zordon to help. So I was a little bit confused at the start, but then it makes sense. It's kind of like, what I told you is true from a certain point of view, because like whoever he was before was destroyed when he became Master Vile. I'm not sure whether he was like ever good, like not like completely evil, but if he was ever good, or he always had that sort of, you know, evilness in him, is what they were talking about before, and that's why he was susceptible to this. I was a little bit confused by that. Not confused, but I just kind of like some more clarification on some of the character beats with that. But I thought it was a cool backstory, bottom line. A little bit of a ramble there on that, but they're saving the Phantom Ranger, but then Master Vile and all the Tangas arrive, and Master Vile is trying to like trick his daughter by putting on the face of what he used to look like as her dad, because we find out the reason they're after Rita so bad isn't just because it's Master Vile's daughter, but because they need a vessel for Dark Spectre to come into this world. And they want to use Rita, and that's what they were trying to prep her for. But before they got there, they decided to infuse Rita with grid energy, which would prevent him from being able to use her as a vessel. So they infuse her with grid energy, so then Master Vile finds that out, that now Rita is like not viable as a possessed candidate or whatever. And he's really mad, but then he's like, well, you know, we can make use of her yet. So that's obviously the origin of how she wound up being raised by him and becoming Rita Repulsa, and they blow the place up, and the Phantom Ranger survives, and then it bookends with where we started at the Imperial destroyed planet. And Zordon's like, well, what happened there with the Imperials? And he's like, it's not the Imperials, it's Dark Spectre. He's risen, basically. So, like, that was cool. Like, it kind of tied into the backstory of Dark Spectre, and then it showed him coming into the plot, which is obviously going to have some sort of huge effect on the current running story in Mighty Morphin and Power Rangers. But, like I said at the beginning, one of my favorite things about this was that it was, like, this really cool backstory, a little bit delving into Rita's character more, and Master Vile's backstory, which was really cool, with some other neat tidbits, but it also ties into the overall story we're doing in the main comics, which I think is really cool. And if they could do that more often, that would honestly be really neat, to get these little one-off stories that kind of enhance the series and give us some backstory on other seasons, but maybe somehow tie it to whatever's going on in the main comic. They don't have to do it all the time, but I thought that was a really cool bit. And I really liked the stuff with Master Vile. Like I said, I was a little bit confused based on some of the stuff they did with Go-Go previously, but I thought it was a really neat backstory that made him more of a character than just Rita's dad. But now I'm really curious where Rito Revolto comes from. Like, did he marry some other skull woman and lock her up? I don't know, or did he make him? I'm curious about that now. I feel like they'll probably delve into that at some point, but I'm really curious about what their explanation for Rito is going to be. But I really like that. And I did like the further backstory on Rita and the stuff about her possible futures and seeing that. I was a little bit, just a smidge disappointed that it was more Rita focused, only because I thought it was so cool that we were doing like Astronema and Ecliptor stuff, and I feel like we got a lot of backstory stuff with Rita and Go-Go, which was cool. I did like this, but I was just maybe hoping to focus on some other people. But then again, we also did get some stuff with Master Vile, and we didn't reveal anything about the Phantom Ranger. Now, I've only read this once before reviewing or filming this review, so I don't know. It's possible maybe they were hinting at something that just went over my head, because I didn't even realize that it was Divatox as Rita's friend, Astronema's friend in the previous comic. So that's possible. So if there's something hinting at something that I'm not getting, let me know in the comments. But they kept it very vague. They did reveal a little bit about how his suit and powers work. And again, I'll probably reread it sometime after this. But my interpretation was that, like, right now, he's almost like made of grid energy, and this suit kind of contains him, or something along those lines, but he used to be somebody else, because he's also telling Rita a story about this knight that found a light in the darkness, and I'm assuming that was him before he became the Phantom Ranger, so I'm not quite sure. But regardless if there's any hints in there that I'm missing, I like how they did that. You know, it kind of enhanced the Phantom Ranger's characters without revealing anything, but I wouldn't mind if they revealed more about him. I feel like there's going to be some fans that, you know, get all twisted up when we reveal more stuff about stuff like that, kind of like with the Psycho Rangers, but I still have mixed thoughts on, but I'm still curious to see their take, so I'm not opposed if they want to do stuff with that later. And one thing I really did like about it was, two things I wanted to call out was the sort of, this isn't the right word since we're reading a comic, but the cinematic nature of the art kind of reminded me of when I was reading not Beyond the Grid, Sins of the Future. Like, after I reread it, like, there was some really cool panels that had a really cinematic, interesting visual language to them, and I really liked that with this, like with the scene that showed the mirrors of, like, Rita's future, and then showed the mirror of Master Vile transforming. And then also there were like 3 different sequences where stories were being told. Like, Rita's mom was telling a story to her, and then Rita was telling a story to Phantom Ranger to sort of keep him calm when he was hurt. And then when they were facing off with Master Vile, Phantom Ranger was telling the story to Rita. And I like how those kind of paralleled each other and told a story, and it was just visually interesting to see, and I really liked the way that was laid out. And I also liked the kind of theme of, like, no matter how dark it gets, you know, a light will pierce through. That's like a general theme in a lot of things, but I felt that was kind of, hinting at Rita's story, you know, because she didn't start off evil as we see here and as we've seen before, and she gets turned into Rita Repulsa, but she goes through all this darkness as Rita, but ultimately the light within her pierces through when she becomes Mystic Mother. And so I liked that sort of through line that was tied into it, because it was kind of a message of the story. It was about Rita. Phantom Ranger also talked about it, presumably in his own backstory, but then it ties into what ultimately happens to Rita. Maybe I was reading too much into it, but I really liked that, and I liked the way that the story was told visually. So yeah, I thought this was a strong issue. I would give it a 4 out of 5. I really liked it. I really love when the comics delve into lore like this. That was one thing that Go-Go Power Rangers did that was really cool, is they delved into lots of interesting backstory and lore. And like I mentioned, just for a three-peat of saying this, I like that we were able to do this, as it would have been strong just as a cool backstory issue on its own, but it ties into the stuff we're building up to with the Power Rangers and the Mighty Morphin comic. But what did you guys think of this? Did you want to see more from the Phantom Ranger, more revealed about him? What else would you have liked to have seen? Would you like to see them do more stuff like this in the future, where we get issues that delve into backstory of Ranger lore but also enhance the main series? Let me know in the comments. As always, until next time, like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell so you can just my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.